I wasn't exactly the life of the party back in college. I didn't join clubs, wasn't the best student, and I wasn't the kind of guy who threw himself into social scenes. To be honest, I wasn't very happy. But that all changed a few years after graduation when I met my now fiancée, Anna. We've been living together in a small apartment with our 2 dogs, and I couldn't be happier. Back then, though, I spent most weekends hanging out with my friends, Chris and Luke. None of us were big party guys, but we still wanted to enjoy college life. If we were lucky, we'd get invited to one of the rare off-campus parties, ones that didn't involve frats or any of the typical college cliques. One Friday afternoon, Luke messaged us about a party his coworker told him about. It's not far, he said, but none of us were really sure what that meant. Still, we figured we'd give it a shot. We drove out to the address Luke had given us. It was in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. The house itself was enormous, clearly one of those places that seemed out of place for college students. We weren't sure if we were underdressed or just out of our element, but the place looked way too fancy. Still, we shrugged it off. We were here now, and we weren't about to leave. As we walked up the long driveway, I noticed something odd. The music coming from inside the house wasn't the usual party fare. No hip-hop or rock, just this weird ambient sound that kind of made my skin crawl. It was like the music itself was alive, pulsating, and unsettling. But we were already too deep in, so we just shrugged it off and went in. The moment we stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The house was way too clean. The lights were bright and unforgiving, unlike the dim party atmosphere I'd been used to. And the people, well, they were all dressed like they were attending a high society event, not a college party. I immediately felt out of place. As we made our way through the crowd, I started noticing little things that didn't add up. A few people gave me strange looks, almost like they were sizing me up. One girl even glanced at me for a split second, her expression going cold, before she turned away. I wondered if it was just my nerves or something else entirely. At some point, Luke pulled me aside. "Dude, something's off. Look around," he whispered, his voice shaking a bit. I looked around and it hit me. The whole vibe of the party was off. People were laughing, but it didn't sound genuine. The atmosphere felt forced. Despite the growing unease, I tried to let loose, drinking and chatting with some of the other partygoers. That was when I noticed the first strange thing. A guy with a red line across his neck. It wasn't a scar or a tattoo, just a bright red line that almost looked like it had been drawn with a marker. I told myself it was probably just some weird fashion choice, but the more I looked around, the more I saw the same red lines on people's necks. I didn't say anything at first, but my paranoia started to build. Luke and Chris were still having a good time, chatting with people, unaware of the oddity I was fixating on. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe I'd had one too many drinks, but when I saw the same red mark on a woman's neck, something in me snapped. I pulled Luke aside and whispered, "We need to leave." "Why?" he asked, his voice a mix of confusion and irritation. "What's wrong with you?" I didn't know how to explain it. The music, the clothes, the strange people. It was all too perfect, too fake. But before I could say anything else, I noticed a tall man with a silver necklace leaning against the wall. He was staring at me in a way that made my stomach turn. I locked eyes with him, and for a split second he smirked at me like he knew something I didn't. I made my way over to the bathroom to clear my head. As I waited for the door to open, I overheard some conversation behind me. I turned, and there he was again, the same tall guy. His eyes were locked onto mine, and then I saw it. A thick red line on his neck. The same one. He stepped forward, blocking my way. "Who invited you?" he asked, his voice calm but cold. My heart raced. I didn't know what to say, so I blurted out the name of the co-worker who had invited Luke. The man didn't respond right away. He just looked me up and down, his eyes narrowing. "Do you see that person here?" he asked in a low tone, before walking away without another word. I was freaked out, but I had no choice but to push forward. I needed to find Luke and Chris. As I walked through the house, I noticed more and more people with the same red marks on their necks. I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence, but the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I found Chris and Luke in the kitchen laughing with some girls. I tried to explain what was going on, but they just laughed at me. "Dude, you're just being paranoid. You've had too much to drink," Luke said, dismissing my concerns. But as I was about to argue further, I saw it. Luke had a mark on his neck, a red line just like the others. I grabbed both of them and pulled them toward the front door. "We need to leave. Right now." Chris was still laughing, but when I pointed out the marks on their necks, the laughter stopped. They finally realized something wasn't right. As we made our way to the door, a random guy walked past us, eyeing us carefully. His neck was marked too. A cold chill ran down my spine. We rushed out of the house and into Chris's car. As we drove away, I saw Luke's phone light up with messages from one of the girls. "Where'd you go?" it read. "Why did you leave?" None of us had told them we were leaving. It made no sense. That night, we all tried to forget about what happened. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those red marks. I still don't know what happened at that party, but something about it felt wrong, like we were never supposed to be there. I'm a graduate student at Purdue University, studying civil engineering. I started this semester and things have been going pretty well so far. I've got a small apartment just outside of campus, and I actually kind of like the quiet. Sure, it's a little isolated, but I'm here for school, not for socializing. The rent's cheap, and the landlord's a little strange, but nothing to complain about. Most of my days are spent in class, doing work, or hanging out with a couple of friends I've made since arriving. I've been keeping to myself, though, focusing on the program and not really looking for anything too exciting. The only downside to my setup? My place is on the outskirts of town, in a sketchy area that's not exactly the safest. But I'm a 25-year-old guy, so I figured I could handle it. I had a car, after all, and I didn't mind driving. Everything was fine until I made a rookie mistake. I had left my backpack unattended in a lecture hall while I ran to the bathroom. Dumb, I know. When I came back, it was gone. Of course, the lecture hall didn't have any cameras and I couldn't track anyone down. My wallet, keys, and laptop were in there. I reported the theft, canceled my cards, and started the long process of replacing everything. I was more annoyed than anything. Just a hassle I didn't need. But it didn't stop there. A few days after the incident, I returned home to find a handwritten note slipped under my door. My first thought was it might be something from my landlord, maybe a maintenance request or a rent reminder. But when I opened it, I froze. The note simply said, "I see you." That's when the sinking feeling hit. Whoever had taken my backpack had gotten into my laptop. They had all my personal information, and now they knew where I lived. My heart started pounding. Worse, they had my apartment keys. It felt like the walls were closing in on me, and I was suddenly aware of every sound around me. I rushed into my apartment, locked the door behind me, and double-checked the deadbolt. I tried to stay calm, but the fear was there, gnawing at me. The next few days were a blur of paranoia. Every knock on my door made me jump. Every rustle outside my window made me freeze. Then the notes started coming. More and more, each one creepier than the last. "I know what you did. Watch your back." Simple, cryptic phrases that only made things worse. Whoever was doing this clearly had access to my laptop, my schedule, and knew where I lived. But I had never done anything wrong. I wasn't hiding any secrets. It felt like I was being targeted for no reason. Still, I didn't go to the police. What could they do? There were no fingerprints, no real proof of anything other than the notes. I kept telling myself they'd get bored eventually and move on. But then one evening, things escalated. I had just gotten ready for bed, and as I glanced out my half-closed blinds, I saw a flash, like someone had taken a picture of me from outside. I jerked the blinds closed, but my heart was hammering in my chest. I could have sworn I saw a figure just for a split second, but when I looked again, no one was there. The next day, more small things started happening. My shoes weren't where I left them. My coat was on the chair instead of hung up. Little, insignificant things at first, but they added up. It wasn't until I came home one afternoon to find my room completely torn apart that I started to panic. My dresser drawers were open, my books scattered across the floor. My bed was stripped of its sheets. It looked like someone had gone through everything. I called the police, but they didn't take it seriously. No forced entry, no signs of theft. There wasn't much they could do. I asked my landlord to change the locks, but he just shrugged it off. "It'll take a few days," he said. "It's not an emergency." That was yesterday. I couldn't sleep last night. I stayed up, every creak of the building sending a jolt of panic through my body. I don't know what to do anymore. I've considered changing the locks myself, but I'm not sure how to do it without wrecking the door. I didn't go to class today. I couldn't bring myself to leave the apartment. I'm here writing this down because I don't know what else to do. I'm preparing myself for the worst. Whoever this is, they know where I live, they know my schedule, they might come for me again. I'm considering hiding and setting a trap if they try to break in. It sounds crazy, but I'm running out of options. I'll post an update if anything happens. Trying to figure out what was happening. The whole class was just as stunned as I was. I could feel my face turning red with embarrassment, my hands shaking in disbelief. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't even look anyone in the eye as the video continued to play. Finally, my professor stopped the video and turned to me, his face a mix of confusion and concern. "Is this the file you sent?" he asked quietly. I nodded, barely able to speak. "No, that's not it." I could feel my throat tightening. The silence in the room felt suffocating. One of my classmates, seeing how shaken I was, tried to ease the tension. "Maybe someone hacked your email," he suggested. But I knew deep down that this wasn't a random hack. This was personal. It had to be. I couldn't help but think of the strange noises outside my window after the breakup. It had to be Ben. No one else would know that much about me, my professor, my classmates. All of them would have been strangers to him. But Ben, he knew everything. And if he was behind this, it was worse than I'd thought. The class was dismissed after that, and I was left standing there, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. I rushed back to my apartment, heart pounding in my chest. As soon as I walked in, I noticed something. It was subtle, just a small, almost unnoticeable shift. My apartment didn't feel quite the same. I couldn't place it at first, but then it hit me. My desk chair was facing the wrong way. It had been turned around. I hadn't touched it since the night before, when I'd been working on the project. A sick feeling crawled up my spine as I realized something. I wasn't alone. I hadn't been for a while. I locked the door behind me and sat at my desk, trying to calm myself. The night was quiet, but the silence felt oppressive. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there watching, waiting. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I was just paranoid from the incident at school, but every little sound seemed amplified. The floorboards creaked. I heard a faint shuffling noise again, like something or someone was just outside my window. The next few days were a blur. I tried to keep it together, but I was on edge all the time. I couldn't focus in class, and I barely slept. I kept checking the locks on my windows and doors, making sure everything was secure. I stopped leaving my apartment for long periods, even though I had to. I couldn't stop thinking that Ben was out there waiting for me to slip up. Then one evening, I received another email. It was from an unknown address. My stomach dropped when I opened it. It was another video, just like the one that had been played in class. But this time, the person in the mask was sitting in front of my apartment building. It was so clear that I could make out the streetlights in the background, the small details of the parking lot. And the worst part? The video was of someone moving toward my window. I couldn't breathe. I slammed my laptop shut and backed away from it, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The video had been taken in the same way the noises had started. Someone was outside watching me, and that someone wasn't just my ex. It was someone who was trying to destroy me. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to the police. They wouldn't take it seriously. It wasn't like I had any proof that it was Ben, or anyone else for that matter. The only thing I knew for sure was that this wasn't just an ex who couldn't let go. Whoever was doing this knew too much, and they weren't stopping until they got whatever they wanted. I thought about confronting Ben, but I knew I couldn't. If he really was behind this, I didn't know what he was capable of. So I stayed inside, trying to make myself as invisible as possible. But every night, the fear crept back. Every time I heard a sound outside, I wondered if it was him, or worse, if it was someone else. It's been a few weeks now, and I still don't know what's going on, but I can't keep pretending I'm safe. Whoever is doing this knows me, and they're not going away. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up.